Welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Billy Keyserling, the mayor of Beaufort. One of my principal functions as mayor is, though Beaufort's a small city and the area around us we consider part of the city, there's a lot that goes on. And so one of my functions as mayor is try to help the public better understand some of the issues before council, some of the issues before the county, some of the issues before the other municipalities, and some of our institutions that make up Beaufort. Today I have with me Lynn McGee. Lynn is the Vice Chancellor for Advancement at USCB. Over the last 2 years, USCB has made a lot of advancement. You've invested over $2 million in the historic Beaufort campus with a focus on arts, and perhaps one day we'll have environmental science to match that. The Beaufort Jasper Higher Education Commission with Chancellor Upshaw has really turned a miracle, because without state support, you've essentially built a traditional looking college campus from nothing. Not that many years ago, we had a few students, alternative students typically, who were at a small campus in Beaufort. When it was determined that it couldn't grow in Beaufort, there wasn't room, but also that in trying to become a four-year baccalaureate school and a regional asset, we had to be more in the center of the world. We had to be closer to I-95. We had to share with Hilton Head. And hopefully, it's my personal view, is one day we'll probably call it University of the Sea Islands, because that's very unique to Beaufort, because we've historically been known as the Queen of the Sea Islands. So while we've had apparently a smooth road with county council and the tax incremental financing bringing $40 million to build the campus, corporations, Hargray, Palmetto Electric coming to the table, individuals coming to the table. We even have roughly 60 people, I think, who came to the table in Beaufort, creating four-year scholarships. But the bottom level is that, notwithstanding all of the hard work, notwithstanding the local investment, Beaufort County invests more every year in the University of South Carolina Beaufort than the University of South Carolina does. Now, personally, there are a lot of advantages to being part of a university system, but I sometimes wonder if the state really wants us, or if we should, like Coastal, one day go on our own. I know the university line is, we're part of the system, and I don't expect to put you in that awkward position, Lynn.
Thank you, Billy.
But let's talk about where we are. Because the bottom line is, as has been the case with our primary and secondary education, Beaufort County has, for another set of reasons, been given the short shrift. We're wealthy, and therefore we get less money back out than we send to Columbia from our sales tax. But the university is a little bit different, because you're funded as part of a larger institution. So why don't we start, before we get down to the real problem, which is parity, with how the university is funded, where the money comes from, and sort of how it's spent.
Right, that's a great question. What we face right now is that 80% of the funding that runs our budget every year comes from students. It comes from tuition and for the operations that we earn money on. Example would be the bookstore, things like that, the food service that we offer. So we're providing 80% of our budget. 16% of our budget comes from the Beaufort Jasper Higher Education Commission, and that is money that flows from the county through the TIF into our coffers to use. What concerns us about that money is that we are now dependent on that money for operations, because the state contribution has gone to 4%. So when the TIF was set up and we started this relationship, the purpose of the county money was to leverage this university and take it from a two-year university to baccalaureate status. And that means spending a lot more in operations, because we need PhD qualified faculty, we have a different kind of library, we need to offer more student services like athletics and housing. So the partnership with the Commission has been excellent, and the county has supported us in leveraging us, building the facilities, and getting us going. Now we need the state to do its part,
we sort
as
of
you
made this
referred to.
assumption, I think, that if notwithstanding lack of support from the state or mixed support from the state, we hedged the bet. We said, we're going to build a campus. The community is going to support the campus. We're going to recruit enough students to have it driven by tuition.
Right.
The Higher Education Commission was going to be, the county was going to be very generous. And the Higher Education Commission has run a pretty sophisticated business operation to be able to, through residential living, through food service, through a number of the services, been able to sustain you. But how long can this last?
I would hate to say. What we do know is that we have to have the model change. We have to get the state funding up to what the other teaching universities get right now. The Commission's doing a great job, but we've got to grow the institution. We want to be a 3,000 student institution because that's where a small public can operate. Private schools can operate a little bit smaller because their tuition is so high. But our purpose is to give access to local students that's affordable as you can get in South Carolina. And right now, our tuition is the lowest in the state.
Let's talk about the numbers a little bit. When I was in the legislature, I always understood that, though I personally raised some constitutional questions about it, when the state was trying to grow higher education, was trying to be competitive, and felt we couldn't build enough classroom space, fast enough, we said, well, let's leverage the private colleges. So we started funding state students who go to private colleges, and the state now is funding private colleges, and to a large extent they're funding private colleges at a level higher than they are some of their own institutions. So you've got a chart there. Let's talk about what the various levels are, and I guess the easiest way is to talk about a per student cost.
Yes, and what we like to look at is per South Carolina student when we talk about legislative money, because the service that we give to the state is educating South Carolina students. When we attract out-of-state students, we get their support. They support our institution at a higher rate than in-state students, and they bring a diversity. So out-of-state students are important, but when we go to the legislature and ask for money, we want to talk about what we're doing for South Carolina students. One thing I want to correct just a minute that you said, if you don't mind, is there any give and take in these interviews, of straight talk interviews?
Absolutely. It is just that straight talk.
Okay. We get no funding from the University of South Carolina at all.
Okay.
Every bit of funding we get is from the state, comes through the legislature, and we are a line item on the legislature's budget. So while the USC system may lobby for us to get more money, it is voters talking to their legislators that move the budget for us. And all the comprehensives are all that way. It is a legislative determined number that we get. And we have suffered from what I call legislative benign neglect in the past.
Well, let me ask you a question, and you can plead the fifth on this one. Because I may be putting your job at risk.
Oh, well, no.
But the reality is USCB has its own accreditation program.
Yes.
You get no money from the University of South Carolina.
Correct, although we get support from them.
You get a marketing association, you get support by being part of a whole. You might have access to certain things you otherwise would. But the support really is marginalized, given the way the model works today. So you're really an independent institution who flies for marketing purposes and support purposes under the university flag, which I wouldn't minimize that. Right. But on the other hand, you've had to go out and get your own accreditation. You have to raise your own money. Right. Yes, you're part of the university system, but you're not alone. So let's take, from your chart, I believe you have some of the different schools.
Yes.
And maybe we'll be able to get this chart up, maybe we won't. But let's go through sort of the range of starting with those who get the most down to the very bottom, which is USCB.
Okay, what we're looking at is the teaching sector. So we're not comparing our per state funding with the funding of the research institutions.
Right.
We're not comparing ourselves with the University of South Carolina, Columbia, with Clemson, or with MUSC. And we're not comparing ourselves with the technical sector. What we're talking about are those independent universities that receive public funding, and there are 10 of them in the state of South Carolina. Sadly, the 3 USC system independent universities, USC Aiken, USC Beaufort, and USC Upstate, all receive below the state average in funding for the sector. So our concern is not to point at individual universities and what they're receiving, but to say that we are all funded below the average per South Carolina student in our sector.
We've got to break for a minute.
Okay.
It does make sense. Let's break for a minute. We'll be back. Okay. And I'm with Lynn McGee, Vice Chancellor for USCB for Advancement, and we're talking about parity in funding for higher education. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Straight Talk with Billy Kay. Today I have with me Lynn Mulkey. If you're just tuning in, I have Lynn McGee. You know, there was a wonderful professor, Lynn Mulkey,
yes.
And I have trouble getting her out of my mind. We lost her, and she was just such a
great
star
right,
there. But Lynn McGee, Vice Chancellor, USCB for Advancement. And what we've been talking about is, with all the advancement and the growth and the excitement, the enthusiasm, the energy at USCB, Beaufort County and the students are carrying the weight, and the state really has left USCB, USC Aiken, USC Upstate, the three lowest compared to the state average state-funded schools. Lynn made it clear earlier that the funding is not a question of the university funding us, it's a question of line items in the state budget, the higher education budget. So Lynn, when we broke, I asked that we talk a little bit about what the average is, real dollars, we're talking about per student costs, and then how the three institutions where they fit in that, and then we'll go on to talk about what the three institutions are doing and how the people can help us in this effort. Okay?
Yeah, that sounds great. All right. If we look at the South Carolina teaching sector, the 10 public comprehensive universities, of which USC Beaufort is one, the average institution in that sector receives almost $2,500 per student to educate a South Carolina resident. The University of South Carolina Beaufort receives $940 from the state to do that same job.
So just over a third.
Yes, and we are the lowest funded per South Carolina resident in the state. So what we're trying to do is get people to take a look at the average and say it's unfair to our students and their parents who are paying roughly the equivalent tuition of everyone else, and the state is not supporting their education in the way it's supporting it at these other institutions. And our legislative delegation is right behind us, Billy. Every person on our delegation is pushing this forward.
If USCB is at roughly 900 out of the 24 average, where does Aiken stand?
Aiken is a little bit better funded. They're at they're about $2,200.
And Upstate?
Upstate is at $1,700 per student. So even Upstate is almost twice what we're funded in Aiken.
We're roughly a third Beaufort, 2/3 Upstate, and pretty close in Aiken. But Aiken's been around for quite some time as a 4-year baccalaureate institution, and Upstate and USCB are the two new ones to come into the system.
And we're the fastest growing. We've been the fastest growing over the last few years. Since the funds have been pretty much frozen at the state, we have grown much faster, and that's part of the problem.
And just so the public will know, what do we fund South Carolina students who go to private institutions?
It's about $2,300 per student. So if my son, Skip, went to Furman or Wofford, we have wonderful private institutions here, when the bill came back to me, the tuition would be minus about $2,400 on average every semester.
Right. We're also, this is a little side issue, but not only do they control the amount they give you, they can control your tuitions too.
Yes.
So we're really stuck in a box, because even if we wanted to charge higher tuitions, which we don't, because we are a state institution and we want to have that special character and that attraction and that obligation the state has. But even if we wanted to raise that money with private tuition or with tuition, we couldn't do that. So I have a brochure, and you know, it looks to me like we're seeing something new in South Carolina, and that is collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are.
Where the three schools that are getting the short shrift are beginning to launch a campaign. Through your students, I presume, and family, faculty, mayors. As you said, our legislative delegation is fully behind us. But what is the process now? So the plan is together. The president of the university, I understand, has put it in his ask, in his budget. It's gone to the governor's office. How did the governor's office respond, or have they yet?
The governor's office forwarded 2 of the 4 requests that President Epastides sent to the office, and it did not include our ask. So on the first day of the session, President Epastides came to the legislature that afternoon, set up a meeting, and we had over 18 legislators attend that meeting who wanted to listen to President Epastides say, this is a critical ask for the system, I need your support. And they have responded dramatically in terms of supporting this ask and moving it forward, which is to bring us, USC Beaufort, Upstate, and Aiken, up to the average. All we're asking is to be funded at the average of the other public comprehensive
treated
universities.
Like the other comprehensive schools. So the process would be, it goes, revenue bills start on the House side, and it goes to Ways and Means.
Yes.
They have a subcommittee on higher education. It is chaired by Representative
Chip Limehouse.
Chip Limehouse, who I served with when I was in the legislature. And then his committee will vet it, will send it to the full Ways and Means Committee, and then it will go to the House. And my experience is, generally speaking, what the Ways and Means Committee asks is what the budget's going to be. Unfortunately, there's very little debate among those. So Representative Herb Kurzman, being on the Ways and Means Committee, certainly helps us. And Senator Davis, when it goes to the Senate, being now on the Senate Finance Committee, gives us some in. But because we don't have the very senior members, because we've had turnover, we do suffer on the seniority end. So it'll go to the governor did not recommend it. It's in the subcommittee. It will soon go to the full committee. If the House passes it, then it will go to the Senate.
Yes.
At which time the Senate Finance Committee will vet it. There's very often a difference between the House and the Senate. So even if we don't make it through the House, we have the Senate as an opportunity to go back. And then if the 2 bills disagree, it would go to conference. So let's assume, however, that it does get through the House, and it does get through the Senate, and then it goes to the governor with the state budget. And of course, that's in the spring, and that's when everybody's scrambling. That's when behind closed doors, everybody's cutting deals for things. And then we keep it in the budget, it goes to the governor. So we would have to then fight a veto unless her mind is changed. And her mind could be changed if she sees a swelling of public support. So if I want to help you, it would seem to me the first thing I'd do is I'd talk to our delegation and say, can I help you with other members since they're on board? Can I send a letter to the governor asking her that if in fact the legislature approves it, would she reconsider and move it up on her list as the president has requested? Well, I know the system. Right. Most of the people out there don't know the system. Most of the people out there say, my gosh, we don't get the money back in primary and secondary. Here's another case. What do we do with our state? So let's talk for the last 2 minutes we have about what it is the people who are watching us today could do to help move this forward.
I think number one is reaching out to the legislature. They're the people who determine our line item budget, and they want to know what people here care about. You're welcome to look up. It's very easy to find the members of the Higher Education Subcommittee of the House Ways and Means Committee. If you want to reach out to them, the President's presentation is January the 30th. They'll be debating, and by the 19th of February, the House budget will pretty much be set. So this is a real-time process that's going on. So I think those are the great ways to use your power as a citizen to talk about why you want and need a lively university that's bringing students here and building something for the community around this community's strengths and weaknesses.
And that we're not. When I was in the legislature, they said, well, you're from Hilton Head. And I said, I'm from Beaufort. They said, well, it's the same thing. And you're rich down there, you can do it. And you know, we're a little stuck because we have shown what we can do. But on the other hand, we've earned our way on our own into a system. So the argument is now we're part of the system. Treat us like we're part of the system. So they would write letters.
Yes, write letters.
Make phone calls.
Yes, write letters to the editor. We had a wonderful editorial on December 30th. Follow that up with letters to the editor locally. We'll be glad to talk with any group that would like to hear more about this and understand higher ed funding.
Okay.
If you call the university, 208-8000, and say,
how would they, why don't we'll put your name up on the board
Okay.
With your phone number,
Okay.
because if anyone would like to volunteer to this effort, this is a great opportunity, friends, to show civic engagement, to show that all great things don't come from Columbia, that the grassroots can drive them.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for watching, and keep tuned on this issue, and please try to help us. Thank you.